Welcome to the Ghoul's Guide to Santa Barbara. Well, my headache went away. Any idea?
No.
Is it Sleepy Hollow?
No.
That would be funny.
I always just try to okay, heads, headless.
I like it. I like the way your brain works.
My feeling is that it's something that will be familiar to me when you say it.
Maybe.
Could you give us... Well, I know you can't. No.
You want a clue?
Yeah, I do.
Macaulay Culkin is in
Oh, I love him. We know that. We
it. Our
already
friend of
established
the
that.
pod.
I still don't know.
You said it's a conversation.
Yeah. So, should I just tell you?
Wait, is it an older movie or a newer movie?
There's like the 90s. Late 90s, maybe?
Late 90s.
I should have looked that up or included that.
I don't know any later Macaulay
Seth
movies.
Green?
Oh.
No.
Oh.
No, the only... I don't want to say Can't Hardly Wait, but Macaulay Culkin wasn't in that.
No. Okay, tell us.
Party Monster.
I've never
Oh,
seen that.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, have you seen it, Jen?
I've seen not all of it all the way through.
Oh, okay. So it's like club kids in New York City.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And like a murder. And
I've read about that murder.
yeah, it's really terrible. The actual story. So based on a true story, but and so like the club kids all go on like Maury Povich or something. And the host is like, so, your son Michael introduced you to ecstasy, right? And she's like, well, I didn't know. He told me it was aspirin or something. and he's like, well, what happened when you took it? And he's trying to be like, oh, this is so terrible. And she's like, well, my headache went away. And it's like, it lives in my brain.
That's wonderful. I am enjoying doing the movie quote as an opening because I feel like it's letting the three of us in on like some of the... Okay, listeners, Liz has this thing where she calls us media damage, meaning that like we think in movie quotes and commercial snippets, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, and
the
like
basic.
jingles from commercials
Right.
from like 30 years ago.
Yes, exactly. And so like,
That was courtesy of my friend Dan.
yeah, Dan.
Shout
okay.
out to Dan.
I don't know Dan, but I think of like Liz and her like nebulous unknown male friend.
Yeah.
When I say media damaged, and I say it a lot.
Yeah.
But I think it's letting us into like more inside jokes with each other because like in the Venn diagram, our media damage does overlap, but not completely.
No.
So it's like, I get to know, I don't know, like that you liked Gleaming the Cube, which I should have known because of friend of the pod.
Seems
Tony Hawk.
obvious.
I know, but like I didn't. So I love that. I love that.
The
It's very
Venn
fun.
diagram of Christian Slater and Tony Hawk and their influence on my life. This is the Ghoul's Guide to Santa Barbara. I'm Jen.
Well, I'm Liz.
I'm Summers.
On today's episode, Summers is going to tell us about Alden Freeman and the ghosts of Franceschi House.
Yes, I am. And it's going to be a long one, and I'm going to get weird and personal. The subtitle of this episode...
Wait.
Mhm.
Weird and personal is so off-brand. Though.
But like more so, in this episode, I'm going to tell you about my very favorite place in Santa Barbara, Franceschi Park. We're going to talk a little about two men involved in that park's origins, a little about the reported ghost sightings in the park, and a lot about why I love Franceschi Park, why I wish the city of Santa Barbara wouldn't tear down the historic mansion in the park, and why I need you to take a trip to the park as soon as you can so you can enjoy it as much as I do. Santa Barbara's park system includes 54 parks that cover more than 2,050 acres of land. The parks, along with beaches, trails, and community recreation centers, are well used, and Santa Barbarans feel a very strong sense of ownership over them, as they should. Living in Santa Barbara for most of my life, I found you can tell a lot about a person by asking them one question: what's your favorite park?
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you two your favorite parks in a second. Liz just rolled her eyes back trying to think of a park. So you have beachy, sporty people who love shoreline park, say. The quiet homeowners who stick to their tiny neighborhood parks like Hilda Ray McIntyre or Willow Glen Park. The dog walkers who can't get enough of the Wilcox property, also known as the Douglas Family Preserve. And kind of the aesthetic downtown-y people who don't go anywhere except Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens. And those parks are great and all, but I am Team Franceschi by a mile.
Yay.
No other park can compare for me. If I find out someone's very favorite park is Franceschi, I know they're probably going to be someone I like. This park-based categorization is an unconventional method of getting to grips with my fellow humans, I know, but I have trouble believing in astrology, and I don't follow any particular sports team. The only vaguely sports-related thing I care about is Bam Margera getting sober. So this is what I do. Why?
Remember that time when you decided you were going to be into football?
Oh, I tried so hard.
You tried so hard to be into football.
I've been trying since about 2007 in like waves. Like I have drawn diagrams.
Wow.
I have like
you tried to teach us about football.
I know.
You did.
And I understood it for like a few seconds and it just falls out of my brain. And the year my Franceschi Park origin story started, I was going through what I would call a dark time. And I don't like to talk about the dark times much. So just imagine the most desperately terrible experience you've ever been through. Maybe losing a loved one or whatever popped into your mind just now when I said desperately terrible experience. Think about it for a second, just a second, and then imagine it lasted for 3 years.
Oh,
I know it sucked. And it actually was more than that. Like this time still affects me and it has to do with my mom's Alzheimer's. But one day I posted on my trusty LiveJournal blog to ask if anyone in the Santa Barbara area had any recommendations for small, manageable adventures I could go on. Earlier that week, I had been driving my cat back from the vet downtown and noticed one of those painted tile plaques. Do they have a name? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like,
probably
it's like
painted tile plaques.
Okay, where it's just like 10 tiles together and then they paint on them and
like a name or an address or
yeah,
whatever.
or like a picture of a high school used to be here and now it's a parking lot for farmers market. Like,
yeah, I don't know what those are called.
Like signs or on the ground or.
I love
No,
it.
I didn't mean that's what they were called. No, I'm trying to picture it in my head. Are you
They're more
talking
like a
about a
historic
sign
thing?
or like something on
Like a
the
historic
ground?
marker type of.
It was in a wall and sometimes they're in rocks and like, but they're usually on a wall and it's like
A marker?
a thing of, I don't know. I just didn't know if the tile ones that
tiled
are hand,
marker?
we'll take pictures of them. They're kind of like
Okay.
maybe a Southern California thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Pulled the car over and got out to look at it. The adobe wall was on the outside of the Poor Clares Convent near Mission Santa Barbara, and the plaque had a prayer for peace in hand-painted colorful lettering at the top with the prayer of St. Francis below it. So I'm not big on prayers in general, but I liked the message of the prayer, which was basically, chill out, it's fine, be at peace, try to help other people not freak out too, and like, we will all just have some peace from
Yes.
this world.
I like that.
And it just was lovely. And as a person who had no peace or solace in her life to speak of at that time, I felt comforted by that and happy I just decided to pull over and look at it, even though that's not the kind of person I am at all. I'll Google it later. And that pleasant and unexpected moment stood out from the never-ending story swamp of sadness of my life so starkly that I decided to seek out more of those little moments to try to keep myself going. Hence the blog post and hence my friend reply, go to Franceschi Park. It's wonderful.
Aw.
I had never heard of Franceschi Park, but I trusted my friends. So I found the park location on MapQuest.
Printed out the instructions.
Exactly. That's my next line. Printed out the directions and set out for my next tiny life-sustaining local adventure and drove up, then down into what looked like a fancy rich person's fancy rich estate. Big gates painted black with, I think they're painted black. They might just be black with 2 ironwork Fs on them and then a long narrow driveway and a little ways in to the left, a beautiful old house. What was that?
Just trying to picture. I've only been up there a couple of times. I'm just trying to picture this gate at the front.
It was probably open, so you probably didn't notice it when you went
It's
through.
usually open
Okay.
and then, I don't know.
Yeah, that park does always feel like spacious and, esteemed.
It's just different. Yeah.
Yeah. You feel so far from the city, but you're so close.
I know.
Yeah, everything up on that quote unquote Riviera area feels like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little ways in to the left, a beautiful old house. I hadn't expected a house. I am not a nature person at all. I'm an indoorsy girl for sure. So a house, that was perfect to me. I parked and walked down the perilous-looking web, cracked and fragmented concrete paths, past a little stone half-circle bench set into the hillside, which will come up again later, looking out over the most beautiful and exciting view of Santa Barbara I've ever seen.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's so pretty, and I'm not a Santa Barbara booster, Could one of you describe that view? Because I didn't want to do it. Like,
Majestic. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's because Santa Barbara,
We call ourselves the American Riviera.
yeah, but it's so it's a little covey in the fact like there's the Mesa area is sort of lower foothills, and then the Riviera area is a little higher foothills.
Right.
And then the downtown area is sort of in that plateau in
and
between
it's very
them.
close and steep. So you're just, you drive for a few minutes and you're like pretty far up but still really close.
From Franceschi, there's an overlook that literally feels like you're standing above the whole city, and you have this view to sort of a
like the grid system. Oh, like the sort of valley type.
Yeah, so it's like
in.
a valley sort of in the shape of our coastline creates sort of a cove where you get this really beautiful view of the ocean, and then the wharf and the harbor.
We'll share a picture on our socials of the view
We
from
will.
Franceschi. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing about the view that I think I like is that you could see the grid system of the streets laid out, and it's like, that it's there, but you don't see it when you're driving around on the streets, obviously, but seeing it from above is just like, it's sort of an oblique angle. So it's like, I don't know. I love it.
And the 101 freeway winds through as the freeway.
I know. From there, I wandered onto the stone courtyard to the side of what I now already thought of as my rundown, Dickensian, beautiful, perfect, definitely haunted stately home, Franceschi House. To my left, I saw a marble statue of a little boy underneath an enormous old tree at the edge of the courtyard. The marble boy was holding a big old-fashioned book open so you could go up and read what it's written in it. And underneath him, when I got a little closer, I saw that at the foot of the statue, the largest word right at the bottom in all caps is peace.
What's in the book?
Oh, it's not religious crap. I don't know. I think he's supposed to be Jesus, but just the only word that I saw was peace. In that moment, I felt like magical thinking was the way to go, because this is the part where I cry.
Aww.
Because clearly Santa Barbara had just presented me. I can't do it. I can't do this paragraph.
Do you want me to read it? Oh,
maybe at the end, yeah. It just felt like Santa Barbara was saying, or the world was saying, you're going to be okay.
And you are.
I mean, sort of. I'm warped by trauma.
But we all are in different ways, and we get through it.
It was just, it felt like a weird coincidence to me that I had just seen that other thing that was like a prayer for peace, and then this, and I was just like, okay, fine.
I love it.
And all that crap brought you here. And this is pretty good.
It is pretty good. I just surrendered to it, said, okay, out loud, and went about my business, spending the rest of the afternoon climbing all around the park. I tried to see into my mansion and tried to figure out why there were little commemorative plaster medallion things.
It's so
with
weird.
People's heads slapped all over it and mysterious carved in labels. It was such a fun day, and it was almost like a foreign experience to me at that time because I did not have any fun. I was Artax and Atreyu in the swamp.
Can we stop bringing that up?
No, I'm going to make you it's exposure therapy.
Oh,
are you crying?
No, you already made me cry.
I'm sorry. I wrote about my day in the park in my blog afterwards, so I can tell you I was just totally captivated by the experience of being able to walk around by myself with no chaperone for free. A gorgeous rundown old estate. I felt like Nancy Drew creeping behind the house, looking in the windows, trying to read what the dirty stained glass windows said on them. It was magical. And because I was the only person in the park that day, I felt very set outside of time.
Yeah.
I could imagine myself there in the 1890s or the 1930s, whenever. Take your pick. It just felt like just an escape from everything.
It is so lightly used.
Yeah.
You'll only ever see a couple other people up there.
Since that day, Franceschi Park is my park. Franceschi House, or Montarioso to give it back its original historic name, is also mine. Although there are one or two places in the world, other than that little 15-acre plot of land clinging to the steep and honestly kind of terrifying Riviera hillside that I love a little better, there is no place in Santa Barbara where I am happier or more at peace. So, what's the park's origin story? Who was this Franceschi the park is named after? And how did what was clearly a wealthy family's estate and historic home become a public park anyone can walk around in? It's definitely haunted, you can just tell, even if you just mean haunted in a sort of picturesque and figurative sense. But is it haunted?
Yes.
And why is Montarioso, the house, so run down? And what's going to happen to it? Well, I'll tell you what. I have those answers for you coming up in just a minute. But first, Jen and Liz, tell me your favorite parks. Favorite Santa Barbara
You go
parks.
first. I'm going to have to panic.
Oh,
decide?
shoot. I've been like thinking about this question
Spur of
since
the moment.
you first brought it up. It's hard because there's the parks that I like going to, and then there's my favorites. Like I would almost say that like Hilda Ray Park that you mentioned is one of my favorites because it's hidden and it's tucked away.
Yeah,
and
cool.
it's like it's on the side of a hill, so it's not exactly super like I wouldn't want to take my children there because
Why not? There's a fence.
I mean it's
Not
a little
little
precarious.
tiny kids though. So maybe, sorry, I talked over you.
It's
I would
okay.
say like, when your kids were really little, like, nope. Like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
it's
either.
not like the
But
best place to hold
They're
a
not
play
gonna
date.
like roll down the mountain. There's a
That's
fence.
true.
But honestly, my favorite park would probably have to be Shoreline Park,
Yeah.
and that's because it was the park that I grew up going to.
Oh, yeah.
It was down the street from my house. It was down the street from my school. A thing I remember doing is like a kind of special thing that we would do is grab a bucket of chicken from KFC there on the Mesa, and then we would go down there and we would have a little picnic and eat our Kentucky Fried Chicken and play at the playground.
Oh, that sounds so nice.
Nice.
Can we all go do that?
Yeah,
sometime?
so we've done that a couple times where we've like gotten takeout and gone there and had a picnic with my family, and it feels very nostalgic to me.
Yeah. That playground has such a popular like fan club of especially moms whose kids have grown up going. And it has like a seal and a turtle.
So there's a
Oh, to
dolphin.
like climb on.
There's a turtle, little concrete
Yeah.
thing that you can climb under, and my favorite thing is seeing kids use it in the same way that we did, and specifically that turtle is perfect. It's kind of like a hump underneath it. It's hollowed out, and so if you go under it, then you can push all the sand and like basically block it off so that you're trapped inside of it, and you create walls up to the like concave or the areas.
Yeah.
So
like you make a little secret room in there,
yes,
like
you
introvert
can
child's
make
dream.
a little secret
Yeah.
room in there, and I loved to do that, and I still see kids doing it, and I can vividly remember. So there's a dolphin also that's a concrete sculpture thing in the play area, and there's something like the curve of the dolphin's back and the scale of it for a child. You can lay in there. You can lay your body on it. And it is like, hammock shaped ish. And I can like right now, as I'm describing it, I can feel my body in that dolphin. And I have a picture of my kids as little kids sitting on that same dolphin that I played on.
Awesome.
It's awesome. Liz, do you have one? You can have more time to think.
I would say Stevens Park. It's my neighborhood park.
That was my guess for you.
There's shade, which I appreciate, as you know.
And a beautiful creek.
There's a creek and a footbridge, and the creek is great because it's just full of large boulders, as our creeks are, and it's like fun for the kids to play around in and kind of.
Which creek is it?
That is San Roque Creek,
Okay.
which flows into Arroyo Burro Creek.
That's a fun creek to watch.
Yeah, but I would also add that my park that I grew up with is called McKinley Park, and that's in Sacramento. It is like a block and a half or something from my house. And if my 10-year-old brain is remembering correctly, like there was a library that I spent a lot of time at that was like in the park, and there was a public pool that I like lived at during the summer. There was like a duck pond. There was a rose garden. I have like this vivid memory of my mom being attacked by a goose and just like being so freaked out. Like geese are mean.
They are.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, McKinley Park in Sacramento.
Wouldn't it be neat if there was some place here that was like a park with a pool and a library?
I was just
That'd be
thinking,
cool.
wouldn't it be awesome if the Mackenzie, the little building at Mackenzie was a library?
Yep.
That would be cool.
It would be really cool. Okay. So I accept that you have other favorites besides Franceschi. But I know that you're also Team Franceschi to a certain extent with me,
Yes.
because we talked about it before. So if at any time you want to jump in with like memories of the park or your first time going up there or whatever.
I actually haven't been there that often. And the last time I was there, I believe was with both of you.
Next up is the Franceschi Park origin story. And it has two parts. Two parts which span the life stories of two very different but interesting and driven men, Francesco Franceschi and Alden Freeman. Let's start with Franceschi because he got there first. We're going to go back in time to 1843, and we're in Italy. So for your mental timeline, 1843 was the year Charles Dickens published his novel Martin Chuzzlewit. 1843 was also the year Joseph Smith told his followers and his wife that God had definitely just spoken to him.
Oh, boy.
It was also just after or right at the end of the first phase of the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
And in terms of tech, 1843 was the year the rotary printing press was invented, as well as the hand crank ice cream maker.
Ooh.
Super important.
Yep.
More importantly to our story, it was the year Franceschi Park's original owner was born in Florence, which is in Italy for us today, but at the time was in the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, because Italy wasn't even a country yet. It was just like a little collection of nation states.
Did not know that.
Wow.
Our guy's name
Hand
was...
crank ice cream predates
Italy.
I know, right? Gosh. Our guy's name was Francesco Franceschi, which sounds like a fake name. And that's because it is a fake name.
Is it?
When he was born, Francesco Franceschi's name was Emanuele Orazio Fenzi.
I kind of like that better.
Francesco, and I'm going to call everyone by their first names in this episode, which I know isn't correct AP journalism style, but I just felt like it would be clearer. Francesco was born wealthy and grew up at the Palazzo Fenzi in Florence, which is a massive ornate palace in the middle of Florence, which Francesco's grandfather purchased. That makes it sound like he purchased Florence. That's such bad writing. The Palazzo Fenzi was purchased by Francesco's grandfather, not only to be his home, but to contain his bank
Oh my gosh.
that he owned.
Wow.
Yeah. So that kind of access to resources we're talking about here is like in Francesco's childhood, it's old world bank owning. I live in an actual palace that contains historically significant frescoes
Wow.
kind of wealth. He married an Italian woman named Christina, who, of course, her last name isn't readily available because started having kids. And then the Fenzi family lost all their money. And I did not really find out how, but it could have been to do with, the closest I got was like, there was just a lot of upheaval because the nation states were uniting and it was like, so it could have just been that. Francesco decided to move to Southern California because we have a similar climate here to what he was used to in Florence. Francesco and Christina got on a boat in 1891 and sailed for Los Angeles, leaving 3 of their children behind.
Adult children, I hope.
Can you just do that?
I don't think so.
Oh my God.
When they got to Los Angeles, Emanuele Fenzi made up the name Francesco Franceschi, which I can't get over that name.
He likes
Yeah.
alliteration too.
Right? Yeah, like Liz loves alliteration.
I know.
Liz loves alliteration. I feel like that we need to Liz loves alliteration.
There's this story, a J.D. Salinger story called Uncle Wiggily in Connecticut. And there's a little girl in it and she has imaginary boyfriends and she names them Jimmy Jimmerino and Mickey Mickarano. And Francesco Franceschi just makes me think of Jimmy Jimmerino, right? Like it's just a weird fake name.
I went to junior high with a kid named Tom Thompson.
No, that's amazing.
And Tom wasn't even his given name. Like I don't want to, name this person.
Okay.
Anyway, because it's a weird first name. But anyway, yeah, he went by Tom Thompson.
I feel like there should be more just people just selecting whatever name they want and just going by it nowadays.
It just feels like he didn't even try and he had to just think of it real quick on this.
I'm trying to think of the context of when they came over. Did he choose the name or was it because there's a lot of people that immigrated and then were just given names because they were like, I can't pronounce that.
I've heard that's
It could be
not
that.
Give it to you.
really
It could be
true,
that.
though.
Really?
Yeah. I don't have any more information to provide on that, but I've heard that that's not really
One person told me at a grocery store.
I don't know. I didn't do that much research into how he chose it or if he chose it. I just read that he chose it.
Where did he?
Okay.
He sailed to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Okay.
From Florence.
I was going to say maybe they landed in San Francisco. He was just like, I like that word, Francisco.
Oh,
Francesco?
yeah, maybe. I don't know. We don't know. Francesco had some talent as a horticulturalist and experience planting up the grounds of Palazzo Fenzi, his family's other home in Italy. So he jumped into doing landscape design full-time in America, with his specialty being importing exciting non-native plants that don't belong here.
Great, thanks.
Yay.
At the beginning, Francesco and Christina were living...
Job security.
I know, right? We have to undo all of the things that Francesco Franceschi did. At the beginning, Francesco and Christina were living off the money her family put up as a dowry when the two got married.
Gosh.
But within 2 years, Francesco was doing well enough to move to Santa Barbara from LA.
Huh.
And Santa Barbara wasn't wasn't hard to move here. It wasn't really expensive. Francesco worked on the Eaton estate in Montecito, starting an organization called the Southern California Acclimatizing Association. He set to work trying to figure out which non-native plants could be used in the general Southern California area.
Yeah.
I read that a lot of planty guys at the time would just bring over anything and try to make it work, no matter where the plant was from, even if it was from a really cold or really hot climate. But Francesco was different in that he at least understood that it wasn't a great idea to do that and that he'd have better success focusing on plants that were used to the weather here.
And
Yeah,
would
I was gonna
thrive
say-
and overtake all of our natives.
Right?
No,
It's such an interesting thing to be like, let's try to focus on how we can bring over the stuff that's going to do worse here.
You do well.
No, because they were trying to find non-native plants.
Right. But that would do okay because of the similar climate.
I think Jen's saying like nothing's going to do better than a native
Than what
plant.
they-
Exactly.
Right?
Okay, got it.
Like
Yeah,
why
yeah.
it's like trying to let's create an alliance to try and fit these round pegs in these square
Yes.
holes.
Yeah.
Well, they were super into doing that at the time. He would bring over seedlings and raise them here and evaluate whether or not they were good candidates for landscaping. He said his goal was, quote, to introduce plants from other countries having climates similar to ours and through appropriate culture, make them thrive and bear. And that's from Pacific Horticulture.org. And I keep thinking you can lead a horticulture, but you can't make her think like that job.
Nerd.
Anyway, shut up. In 1895, after 3 years based at the Eaton estate in Montecito, Francesco moved his Southern California Acclimatizing Association operations to downtown Santa Barbara, and he had multiple locations. It wasn't just a research place. It was also a nursery where you could buy plants. So he sort of had two branches to that. And then in 1903, Christina, his wife, bought 40 acres of land on the Riviera, and they started building Montarioso, which means airy mountain in Italian. And then they enlarged the house, which when you go up to Franceschi Park, you'll see it's a pretty small house now, so it must have been really small to begin with. Mm-hmm. They enlarged it in 1907. And the key thing about the choice of location for the Franceschi's land was that it's not exactly down at sea level. It's 800 feet above sea level, but it doesn't get any frost at all, so it's great for plants.
Oh, that makes sense.
The Franceschis planted about a quarter of the land they bought, and they didn't do formal plantings. They were very late 1800s about their landscape design style, so it was just whatever little groupings looked nice to them. And you can see that when you go up there today because a lot of their plantings are still there. They tried to group plants in a way that seemed scientific to them according to what species they were and like how species were kind of like related to each other, I guess. A lot of sources say that Francesco introduced 900 species of plant to California.
It's so funny how these things that like if somebody else read the statement would be like, some sources say that he introduced 900 different species to Santa Barbara. And we're like, he introduced 900 non-native species.
I know. Just to go into the Acclimatizing Association situation with like bringing the the anathema plants over here. I know that it sounds sketchy as hell to us in the 21st century, but at the time there was a lot of that sort of thing going on in America. One example is that there was a whole group of people who really liked Shakespeare a lot. So they decided it was important for the landscape of the United States to sort of reflect the landscapes Shakespeare wrote about. For instance, Shakespeare wrote about starlings, birds. Starlings in Henry IV, Part 1. So a man named Eugene Eugene, brought a bunch of starlings over and released them in 1890 in like Central Park in New York.
Really?
And Eugene was president of the American Acclimatization Society, a group that thought they needed to upgrade North America by releasing, quote, such foreign varieties of the animal and vegetable kingdom as may be useful or interesting.
Ecological colonization.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. It was like, if this isn't enough like home, which is clearly superior, like we will make it like home.
Yeah.
With no consideration for the ramifications of these actions.
Yeah. I just think they either didn't care or didn't. I'm not sure. I don't know if it had been done before. So
Right.
I don't know if they knew that there would be like vast devastation, but they probably did and didn't care. I don't know. Eugene in particular wanted to make sure every single bird mentioned by Shakespeare was brought over and given a chance to grace our countryside here in the States. There's an article called The Men Who Meddled with Nature that you can read at welcomecollection.org. We'll put up a link to that. And I also found an article that claimed that none of the stuff I just told you about Shakespeare and the Starlings is true, that it's like way too tidy of a myth. Like, I cannot tell a lie in cutting down the cherry tree. Like, it's just sort of a fable of American society. But either way, the American Acclimatization Society did exist and did introduce non-native species to the U.S. because that's where people's heads were in general back then. And yeah, I wrote like that it's the colonization of flora and fauna was popular. So we're on the same page that's mentally funny. There. Okay.
Sort of similar in my head, but probably tangential is like the idea that all of the cats that have 6 toes are descendants of Hemingway's cats.
Right.
That's just a thing that I like. You could tell me. I mean, it obviously makes sense that it's probably not correct, but like I will still believe in my heart of hearts that all of them are Hemingway's cats.
So a lot of sources say that Franceschi introduced 900 species of plants to California and totally changed the landscape. But in 1943, for some reason, a researcher named John Tucker looked into that claim and decided it wasn't true and could not be taken at face value. That's a quote from him. He also said it's not even possible to know how many types of plants Francesco brought to California. So that's like a womp womp conclusion there. After 15 years in California, the Franceschis packed up, went back to Italy, and started using their original name of Fenzi again, which makes me so curious as to why they did that. Like, why did they change that name?
Because of the wealth there and like the
name
recognition?
Or I'm wondering if maybe they had some debt or they were like being looked for, or like the Fenzis were maybe like known and disliked outside of Italy. I don't know.
Interesting.
I would sort of like to know, but I don't know. Franceschi / Fenzi eventually went to Franceschi / Fenzi eventually went to Libya and planted thousands of eucalyptus trees there, probably as windbreaks that you were telling us about, Jen, I think at some point.
Yeah.
And he actually did change the landscape of Libya quite a lot. And
wow.
He died there in 1924. A couple of photos of him online, but if you're curious what he looked like, you can just drive along Mission Ridge Road near Franceschi Road and look for the sizable boulder that has been chiseled into a bonkers sculpture of his head.
Oh my God.
I've never seen that thing in real life. I think
I have photos of it, and I also like drew art about it and like made it talk. I'm not joking. It made me laugh so much the first time I saw it that I went home and made art about it. So we'll post that on our social media and in the YouTube video for this episode. Yay. Oh, I committed myself to doing the pictures I see in the video.
Thanks, past summers.
Oh, screw you. So back to the story. How did the city of Santa Barbara get the Franceschi land? Did Franceschi make a gift before he left to preserve his botanical garden and home for future generations? No, he did not. Our horticultural Jimmy Jimmerino had absolutely zero to giving us the very best park in our local park system. He sold his house, and it was eventually bought by a fascinating man named Alden Freeman, who would leave his own very individual mark on it and Santa Barbara. So let's talk about Alden now. Side note, my mother almost named me Alden. She was into genealogy, and she found out that like her family was related to John Alden from the Mayflower. Came over to do some colonizing, and I did fact check her on ancestry.com, so I don't think she made that story up. When you meet someone named Alden, you can bet pretty solidly they're from a Mayflower family, or they think they are. Like, I wouldn't have minded that name for myself, but I ended up with Summers, which is also a surname, but with no like snooty high society.
I love that this podcast could, if we were all born male, this podcast could have been Andrew Jackson, Alden. Did you have a weird colonizer potential name?
I don't know if my mom had a boy name.
I was going to be Alden as a girl.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, Alden Freeman was also a Mayflower John Alden descendant, so I guess I'm very distantly related to him in some way, probably. Yeah, that would make sense, right? If we're both descended from, yeah, we're related.
That's how it works.
Yeah. More importantly, in one article I found, which we'll post on our website, ghoulsguide2sb.com, he was described as, quote, a socialist, radical philanthropist, and architect. Alden Freeman was born in 1862 in Cleveland, and like Francesco, he was born into money and a well-known society family. Alden's father, Joel Freeman, was the treasurer of the Standard Oil Trust. Standard Oil was John D. Rockefeller's company, and boatloads of cash. And Alden inherited enough Standard Oil money to retire at 27 and just do whatever he wanted.
Oh my God. What is that life?
Right? I want that life. Before that, though, Alden went to New York University where he studied architecture and received a master's degree in architecture. And in the early 1880s, he worked as an associate architect with Lorenzo B. Wheeler and as a loan clerk in a bank. So he did work during his life. And once he came into his inheritance, he started leaning towards journalism and progressive causes in New Jersey, where he lived. Although we'll see that he would collaborate with other architects on his own personal projects later on, but he didn't work in that field anymore. In 1903 and 1904, he owned a newspaper in New Jersey called Newark Truth, which was a weekly paper and promoted progressive causes. And this is even before his father died in 1910 and before he got his whole inheritance. Why are you smiling, Jen?
Sorry, you can totally cut this out later. I was checking my phone. So Alden Freeman was heir to the Standard Oil.
He was, so I don't know how this worked, but there, like, a lot of people got fortunes.
Okay,
right?
because my ears pricked up because so the house on the coast that Taylor Swift owns is called Holiday House. She wrote a song about it, and the owners, there's a line in the song that says Bill was the heir to the Standard Oil name and money. And they used his inheritance to originally purchase that house.
Oh, awesome. So, yeah, I don't know exactly how it worked, but the Standard Oil Trust that Alden's dad managed, I think a lot of families had fortunes related to that money because it always says he inherited a Standard Oil fortune. So not like the.
Yeah. Yeah, you can edit that out.
No, I loved it. It was really cool. Alden was such an interesting figure to me because he had so much money and he didn't have to do anything, but he still did stuff, which is a thing I find admirable. Among the things Alden did were researching his family history and building monuments to it. He even had sort of a socialist take on the, at that time, sort of snooty rich person's pastime of genealogy. He wrote, just because like records of poor people were like less.
Yeah.
But, you know,
it's
and
a
like
slippery slope for rich people to go from genetics to eugenics.
Oh, that too. But like, just if you wanted to research your family, like across the country, you had to go across the country, you know, like who has money and time to do that. And then even just like the record keeping was not so great for poorer people. It was just like census records. He wrote about it in an article in Town and Country magazine in 1905 saying, quote, "A true and sincere study of genealogy should lead not to pride of ancestry by the picking and choosing of those forebears who distinguish themselves, but rather to a democratic feeling of brotherhood with all mankind, for, on going back only a few generations, we will find ourselves related to nearly all the inhabitants of a certain town, such as Enfield or Duxbury, and among our fellow descendants we'll find some perhaps in the humblest walks of life. If pursued in the proper spirit, I believe genealogical studies will lead not to inordinate pride of birth," I cannot talk, "not to inordinate pride of birth, but rather to emulation of the virtues of distinguished ancestors and to sympathy and helpfulness for their less fortunate descendants."
Awesome.
Yeah. I put that in there for you because you like
genealogy.
I was going to say, I wonder if he had anything to do with like the Genealogical Society.
It didn't start till like 1972.
Never mind then.
That's a good question, though. So that article was reprinted in a book Alden wrote about his efforts to research his mother's family. And he had helped build a monument to his ancestor, Captain Thomas Abbey, who was a Revolutionary War captain. And although Alden's writing is lovely, it's pretty dry. So like if you're not into the Abbey family or 1700s army captains, don't read it. However, I did learn from it that Connecticut sent more soldiers to fight in the Revolutionary War than any other colony. And also that Captain Abbey's battle drum had a unicorn on it. The most interesting thing to me is that the book has a few photographs of the monument Alden helped build, and you can see he was already way into plaster medallions. So
foreshadowing.
Yeah. We'll post the one from the Abbey monument on our Instagram at Ghoul's Guide to SB. So Alden's monument to Captain Thomas Abbey was built sometime between 1910 and 1917. And in 1924, Alden built and helped design a home called Franklin Lodge, which is in Miami, Florida. And he was, ironically, involved in historic preservation of historic homes, such as the Franklin Mansion in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, which I think is ironic in light of the state of Franceschi House today. In 1927, though, Alden is here in Santa Barbara in possession of Montarioso and a good chunk of Francesco Franceschi's original land holding, and he decides he wants to improve the house with statuary.
Yay.
And
So
plaster
weird.
medallions.
Yeah.
I know, they're so weird. So people will know things about American history and other people he thinks are important.
Okay.
When they come visit his house.
I guess.
And see all of these medallions with zero context.
I know, they're so strange. I don't know. I don't know why he did it.
Who knows if I will ever own property in Santa Barbara? But if I do, the odds of me covering the exterior of my home with plaster medallions to educate visitors.
Slim to none.
Yes. Actually, I don't.
I think it would be fun.
It's probably less slim to none than for other people.
So he works out a plan for all the people and events he wants to memorialize, and some of them are wild. There's 85 of them
Are there
on the
really?
house. And I think that's just the round heads, like, because there are other things. There are like scenes, like
That's
big
right.
rectangular scenes and stuff. I will tell you about a few. For instance, Florence Maybrick, whose medallion labels her as a prison reformer, was an American woman who was convicted of murdering her British husband by poisoning him. She was sentenced to death, but popular opinion was that she was not guilty. And after reviewing her case, the UK Home Office found that, yes, she had intended to poison her husband and kill him, but there was reasonable doubt as to whether or not the arsenic that killed him was the same arsenic that she gave him.
What?
Because men took arsenic for fun back then as an aphrodisiac.
Ew.
Of course.
So, and it said and tonic, which I think just means like if you're tired, it perks you. I don't know, perks you up.
That's
So she went to jail instead of the gallows. And during her time in prison, she wrote about inhumane practices in Woking prison. Woking is a place. When she was released, she moved back to Connecticut and published a book about her experiences, which is, I assume she's called Prison Reformer on her medallion.
told me about this one before, I think.
I didn't remember it, so I
Okay.
might have, but like there was a, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sounds familiar.
I think I told you about it
you?
because
Okay.
I think in that book that I have, there's, I might be remembering this totally wrong, but I want to say that there's something about the reason she poisoned him. He may or may not have been Jack the Ripper or something.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. There was a reason why he was like violent, and that's why she poisoned him. And the book, I want to say, made some connection that to him being like a doctor at the time.
Ooh.
Oh.
Interesting.
I'll have to find that.
Can
I
we
knew that
please?
sounded
Maybe that can be a
familiar.
mini-sode.
Yeah.
And I do. Okay. When I saw the name Maybrick, I was like, that reminds me of Jack the Ripper for some reason. Because I was like heavily into Jack the Ripper stuff like 20 years ago before the dark times. But here's another one. William Jennings Bryan, who ran for president as a Democrat, Secretary of State under President Woodrow Wilson, and he was the attorney for the prosecution at the Scopes Monkey trial in 1925. And that's the trial the play Inherit the Wind is based on, if you had to read that for school. And so he was the one like on the wrong side of that. So I don't know why he's up there. Nan Britton, mistress to President Warren G. Harding, is another medallion.
His criteria for medallions
I know.
is really fascinating.
I know. And you can learn all about Nan Britton in season 1 of Boardwalk Empire. Again,
Oh.
we love the theme song. And I've told you before, is a show we love. And supposedly she had a child with Harding before he was president, which is why the medallion says the president's daughter on it. There's a whole article in the Santa Barbara Independent about it, but like this is already a long episode, so I'm not going to tell you anymore. But then I thought it was so weird, and then I connected it to the mistress in Boardwalk Empire, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's wild. I'm okay with that. My favorite, I think, though, is Mary Wollstonecraft, who may sound familiar to you, even if you're not a weirdo history fan, because her daughter, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, wrote Frankenstein,
Got it.
the first science fiction novel.
The mother of science fiction.
Yeah.
Side note.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever watch or did you ever watch Drunk History?
I
Yes.
love Drunk History.
There's an excellent one about
there?
Mary Shelley.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
totally watch that. Maybe we could find it on YouTube and link to it on the website.
So funny.
I love any shows like that, like Drunk History, Horrible Histories. I love like, yeah. So the OG Mary Wollstonecraft, not her daughter, was a feminist icon herself. In 1792, she published A Vindication of the Rights of Women, in which she basically says that women's rights are natural rights and thus they come from God. So men deciding that women don't get to have their natural rights means men are sinning. It was not popular with the men. And I have a lot of random facts stored in my brain because I have a tendency to like dive into my special interests, as you know. And one year, one of my special interests was the comedian Mark Steele. And he has these fantastic like educational comedy series. He has a few of them, but the Mark Steele lectures was like all I listened to for a while. And it's like the basis for most of my political knowledge, which is limited, but at least it's more now. So thanks to Mark Steele's episode on Mary Shelley, I will never forget that Mary Shelley and her soon-to-be husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley, had sex for the first time atop her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft's grave. I know.
She's like the OG goth girl.
Yeah, she kind of is. And like, if I have to carry that fact around in my head forever, so do you. The medallion that I find most potentially troubling, but also kind of the funniest, is the medallion of Benito Mussolini, which I think is worth talking about a bit so I don't come off like a fascist sympathizer in my admiration of Alden Freeman, because he was problematic too. Like,
yeah,
he was maybe like more interesting than some people and he has very interesting history, but he was not 100% great. So
you're referring to Alden, not Mussolini.
Yeah, sorry.
Your feelings for Mussolini, I assume, are stronger.
Mussolini's only kind of bad.
I mean, of all the things he did, he's kind of on the bad spectrum.
Yes, sorry. Alden, he's complicated, and I acknowledge that. So keep in mind, this is well before World War II. We're talking in the late 1920s. And in the 1920s, a lot of Americans were real into Mussolini.
Wow.
I know. In one article on the Johns Hopkins Bologna Institute for Policy Research.
That's pronounced baloney.
Screw you. There's a summary of a book by author Katie Hull from the University of Amsterdam. And it says, like many Americans, fascist sympathizers interpreted the Great Depression as a result of over-industrialization and demanded new legislation. They believed that Mussolini's policies achieved a balance between man and machine. The fascist regime. I can't talk. The fascist. I can't. Do we just leave this in? The fascist regime. You know what? I'm done. American fascist sympathizers characterized Mussolini's policy as using high-tech methods to return to a traditional way of life. So I'm not reading that is just going to be like word salad, but the basic idea was the sort of intellectual elite and wealthy people in America wanted to protect the poor, but they didn't want the poor to be able to vote on that. They wanted to just like kind of take care of them. And Mussolini had a system for that. He had like panels of experts on various topics. And a lot of those topics were like, what do we do with these poor people? And like the experts would decide and they had the vote and the poor people didn't have the vote. And so it was basically like, let's use technology to make working the land easier and reclaiming land easier and then just like move them and put them there. So it's a little bit like reservations. But the American elite was super into it and they liked to look at Mussolini's policies to kind of like cherry pick things that might work here.
Yeah. Well, wasn't like literacy testing for voting like a thing?
Yeah, I guess. Yes. I don't know if it was at that time.
Yeah, I don't know what
probably was. So anyway, that obviously turned out to be not a great situation overall. The Mussolini thing, it didn't lead to anything good. I don't know any details as to exactly why Alden Freeman slapped Benito Mussolini's big old face on the side of his house. But, you know, at least we know he wasn't alone in his interest in like all that stuff. The Franceschi house medallions are worth seeing if you live like within day trip distance, I think, especially if you have a tendency to find things really funny that are like just weird. And I'd really like to lean on the peer pressure and encourage any of our listeners to visit Franceschi Park and just like bask in the weird beauty of that. Alden Freeman didn't stay in Santa Barbara long, and my uneducated guess is that he didn't really put down roots here. So he just like set about kind of redoing the house, maybe with the intention of handing it over as a park. I'm not sure. Because I mean, the way the house looks with all of those like educational and historic sculpture, I mean, it looks like a public.
You don't normally put, medallions of Mussolini for resale value.
Maybe you don't. But yeah, exactly. Like it's just a weird thing to do. So Alden had more than one parcel of land in Santa Barbara. And in 1931, he donated the old Franceschi land and another parcel on the Riviera, which the city named Franceschi Park and Sylvan Park.
Okay.
Although originally Sylvan was called Silwan, and I could not figure out what that meant. It's like maybe a Hebrew or Arabic word. And
interesting.
Yeah. So if I ever find out like definitively what it was supposed to like reference, because knowing Alden Freeman, like it definitely referenced something. Yeah. Sylvan Park is sort of a nothing park. It only covers about a fifth of one standard Walmart, but it's shady. There's a bench and there's an old dry water feature from the 30s and a tiny bridge over nothing. And you can see right into the next door neighbor's yard, which must irritate them. But if you can find a place to park on the windy little streets around it, it's a really nice place to read a book and just like chill out.
Cool.
But there's not much of like a view or anything.
Yeah,
it's just a random like, there's nothing in it except like what was supposed to be a water feature.
Didn't we have a plan one time that we were going to lunch at each of the different parks?
Yeah, but I think we went to one and there was that seagull eating an old 6-foot Subway sandwich and a bunch of like drunk men.
Yeah.
And we just abandoned it after Ortega Park.
That tracks.
That seagull, I loved that seagull so much. Yeah, but we could do it now. I could come meet you guys.
We could start at Sylvan Park.
I know. Around this time, Alden was spending a lot of time in Miami, where he had bought some property and was working with another architect to design and build another residence called Casa Casuarina, which means House of the Australian Pine Tree, and is possibly named after a 1926 Somerset Maugham book of short stories called The Casuarina Tree. February 1931 article in Time magazine called him the Honorary Consul General of Haiti, and I have no idea what that means.
Wait, can we go back? Can you spell that word?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I could be pronouncing it wrong, but I watched so many tiny little YouTube videos with like the little mouth going like Casuarina. Casa Casuarina. It's Casuarina. It looks like Casuarina.
Huh. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's just a kind of tree.
It's interesting that they named it the Spanish word. Like,
I know. It's like just that imperialist colonial like mishmash that we kind of still live in. But yeah, it's odd. And he probably just liked alliteration and
like casa and then an Australian word.
Yeah. Yeah. Time also mentions that Alden, a quote, wealthy and eccentric Florida philanthropist and globetrotter, announced thereafter he would only travel by air, unquote. And like he tried to go visit a friend in the Caribbean, but the plane had to make an emergency water landing and it just floated for like hours until a steamer came by and picked them up.
Oh my God.
So like it was a different world at that time. You'll notice the description of Alden as eccentric in that contemporary article in Time. And according to the Queer Places website, which we'll link to, that was one of the code words the media of the time used to signal that Alden Freeman was gay. And we ran into that also with Liz's episode on Santa Cruz Island.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Stanton, was it?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's what that means, apparently. Probably not all the time.
Right.
Not in every context.
Perpetual bachelor.
Yeah.
Alden was openly gay, which was, of course, rare at the time.
Yeah.
And it would have been a lot less dangerous for him because he was so wealthy and he just did not care.
Yeah.
And like he wasn't beholden to anybody because he had, fuck you money, basically. But even then, they wouldn't even really write about it. They'd just sort of like, wink, wink, he's quirky. He wears shorts, like that kind of thing. Another clue to Alden's queer identity is that he, as a single man in his 60s, adopted an adult son named Charles Daniel Bolton. I am not suggesting he was in a romantic relationship or partnership with Bolton, although that is definitely what I thought at first. But I believe the implication is that he was an unmarried man who just kind of adopted a family later in life. I don't know, though. It was real hard to tell, but Bolton had a wife and was a gardener. He worked at Montarioso and Sylvan Park. Yeah. So I don't know about that, but some accounts do list Bolton. I was going to call people by their first names. Do list Charles as co-owner of a partner owner with Alden of Casa Casuarina in Miami. So who the hell knows? If any of you listening know more about it, please leave us a comment or email us and end my confusion. You can email us at ghoulsguide2sb@gmail.com.
So it sounds like maybe he just was trying to establish some sort of legacy with this man and his family to potentially bequeath the residence or something to him.
I think it may have been something like that.
Leave money without the legal challenges or whatever,
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I did find one little reference to the fact that Charles was from, I think, England or something like that. And maybe being adopted would help him stay. But that was a maybe. So I don't know. It's interesting. Alden's life was real complicated. It sounds like.
Sounds like it.
And Alden and Charles named Casa Casuarina after Somerset Maugham's 1926 book of short stories, like I said. And that's another sort of defiant move on Alden's part because Somerset Maugham was widely known to be either bisexual or gay. So I found one article that said, the evidence suggests that the elite social circles Freeman belonged to in Miami were keenly aware of his homosexuality and seemed to have tacitly accepted his gender and sexually transgressive behavior in the tropical fairyland. A real interesting.
That is a lot of words.
It was so much.
Wait, is Miami the tropical fairyland?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. Ugh. Later in life, Alden was arrested and put into a psych ward for doing what was probably just going to a gay bathhouse. But it was never really described as that. It's just subtext. We think that. And then later, Charles Bolton is made his guardian after that. So it seemed like maybe it was just a functional family. Yeah. I don't know what the whole thing was with that. Side note, if Casa Casuarina sounds familiar to you, it may be because it's the Versace mansion.
Oh,
that Gianni Versace. Yeah. So Gianni Versace was murdered in front of it in July 1997 as the final killing in Andrew Cunanan's 5-victim murder spree. And I don't even know what to do with this side note because it's just a lot, right? But it was just so interesting to me, just a weird coincidence. There's no real connection between that murder and Alderman Freeman or Santa Barbara, but it's interesting. And that house is another medallion decorated home. You can it's a hotel now and you can stay there if you have really? A lot of money free, and you can stay in the medallion suite or something. But looking at pictures of the exterior, I didn't see any medallions, so I don't really know. Yeah.
It sounds like there could be a connection if it's, just based on where you found the information, if it's a home that is understood to have been, part of queer history, that may have been what led him to purchase it. That's
a great point. Yeah. So maybe it is connected in a sort of subconscious way. Okay, Franceschi Park today. Franceschi Park is 17.2 acres. Another section of the park across Mission Ridge Road called Lower Franceschi. That was part of, and there's stone stairs there that are really picturesque and wonderful. You can get to them off of Dover Road if you're driving up there and just climb up. And a lot of the people in the neighborhood jog up and down them. And I used to go there every Sunday and just try to get up them once and not die. Or the youths are prancing up and down. And I was I'm really trying not to die. But I eventually made it all the way up there, but I don't think I could do it again now. With Sylvan Park's 0.76 acres, that means Alden Freeman gave us a total of just under 18 acres, or the equivalent of 4.2 standard Walmarts. most of which is Franceschi Park. Today, Franceschi Park and Montarioso, or Franceschi House, are still a great visit, even though you can't go inside the house because it's slowly disintegrating and thus dangerous. For years, a Parks and Recreation Department caretaker lived inside Montarioso, but as the building became more and more unsafe, a separate caretaker's house had to be built.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
lucky.
Yeah. Most of it is just like beautiful and like rich wood and like, and then there's like this 60s looking crappy Formica bathroom or whatever where the caretaker lived. Like, I think he lived on
It's
just
like a little
one
apartment,
floor.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, like a little apartment.
That makes sense.
The historic mansion was locked up and rarely visited except to tend to the radio repeater tech that is for some reason housed there. Over the years, various attempts at restoring Montarioso cropped up, including a major campaign by the Pearl Chase Society, but nothing really gained traction, so the city hasn't made any efforts to save the house beyond a pretty recent feasibility study that determined that the cost of making Franceschi House safe and restoring it would just be way too much to even think about spending. It would be around $6 million, or that's what they said at the time, which I think was 2015. In 2018, Santa Barbara City Council voted to demolish historic Montarioso, and I just hate that for us.
Yeah.
It's such a mistake, in my opinion, and Santa Barbara is really difficult to love sometimes, like just with the cost of living and just a tourism town and a beachy town. There are drawbacks to living in Santa Barbara, especially for me, who's not a beachy person. But I will mourn the loss of Franceschi House pretty much forever when it's gone. I like to think that I'll just leave town when it's gone. I'm already priced out of here, so why not be dramatic about it and flounce off because of something, you know? I'll be like the baby wolf meme going like, "Awoo!" Like, this is my huge statement that nobody saw or cared about or was threatened by. I'll just be sad forever. I think about my favorite beautiful hometown thing being gone and like replaced by, a bland interpretive pavilion with some medallions slapped into it. I assume that's what will happen. We don't want to be too harsh about that situation. I mean, I want to be, but it won't do any good. So I'm not gonna rant.
It's just
Hashtag
a bummer.
save Franceschi House.
I know. It's just such a bummer because it's such a cool place. And
it's so unique. And it could be like, it could make money.
Yeah. And it's just crumbling.
It could be a place that like they give ghost tours or, whatever.
Yeah.
Or have weddings. But it's also, the Riviera has a lot of like pretty wealthy people. And I think there's a really tight like neighbors association and they don't want more traffic in their parks up there.
Yeah. It's hard because I feel like people rally behind saving things that they determine to be historically important.
Right.
And who gets to decide what is historically important aside from other things? Like maybe there could be some revenue involved, but also like, how come we can't just save things because they're cool?
Yeah.
And they're unique.
And it's a piece
like
of
we don't
our
have
history.
to we don't have to save every building with a red tile roof or, like how about the unique things and just saving them for unique sake? Like, because it is different.
And there are like limits on the number of people you can have at an event at every other facility. So like you keep it to small events. I mean, I think it's doable. It just bums me out.
It bums me out too a lot.
There's a lot of places that are very similar where you could have events. This feels like it would be an opportunity for something a little different and a little unique.
Yeah. And just that day that I told you about at the beginning of the episode, it was so meaningful to me. And like, I'm going to cry again. But it was so interesting. I've never had the opportunity to just wander around like a derelict mansion grounds, even just like as a tumble down place. I feel like there's value. I just hope they leave it there until it falls in on itself.
Yeah.
Or like,
it's sad in that like it's sad to watch it just sort of slowly disintegrate, like you said. And it also gives me dread about the Clark mansion.
Bellascardo.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
I'm concerned about that is just sitting there, and if there's not a plan, it gets lost.
Yep.
And there's a lot of history that I don't think we need to focus so much on.
Yeah.
But I feel like these little pockets of magic that are magic for people, I feel like should be.
Okay, so Suffice it to say, we are sad about the impending doom of Franceschi House because to us and so many other Santa Barbarans, that house, not just the surrounding park, but the house, is magical and meaningful, and maybe even a little bit tied to our own sense of identity as introverted, bookish, imaginative people from this town, as opposed to surfers or hikers or pickleball players. Santa Barbara will be a little bit worse forever without Montarioso. But now, spirits of the park, I promised you. Ghosts. Remember when I promised you some ghosts?
Yes. You've made it this far.
Okay, I know.
Here are the ghosts.
This should be one that we break up into like 5 pieces. It's time for Spirits of Franceschi Park. According to the website Atlas Obscura, local urban legends suggest the former home of the Franceschis does not rest easily. Tales of unexplained lights and sounds from the mansion are seen as evidence of paranormal activity or restless spirits. It's likely, however, that these reports are simply the normal reaction of the community, of a community with a derelict stately home in its midst. No investigative results or eyewitness accounts exist to prove Franceschi House is haunted. And okay, Atlas Obscura may have a little healthy skepticism about the Franceschi Park ghosts, but I spoke to a Parks and Recreation employee last year, and he said they're turning away ghost hunter shows who want to film there.
Really?
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Anything that brings public attention to Franceschi Park, and especially to Franceschi House, is strongly discouraged because of the controversy over tearing down the house.
Ew.
Not wanting to book ghost facers or...
Ghost Adventures.
Okay, so not wanting to book things like Ghost Adventures. I don't know if it was Ghost Adventures, but...
Probably, because they just came to Stowe House recently.
Oh, maybe. This was like...
is it longer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I like that our little podcast episode now is an act of rebellion against that.
Mm-hmm. But what we do know for sure is that there is interest from people who think ghosts are real. They feel like the reports are credible.
Ooh, interesting.
And or people with interest in selling a show.
But I mean, they think there's going to be something there that they can like, I don't know. It just, they're not coming to my house. So
it looks like a good backdrop
It does.
for a wah, wah, wah machine.
Let's call the spirit box, Jen.
Yes. One of my favorite things that Liz has ever said to me was, you were telling me about spirit boxes, and I think I said like, oh, the thing that goes like, and she's like, no, I just said it goes wah, 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 wah. It made me so happy.
And I hear that as the context of there's such thing as a wah wah pedal.
Oh, yeah.
For guitars. That was all I think about it.
But I, for one, am convinced. And, I ain't no wizard, though, so the jury's out. But lantern lit nighttime ghost tours of Franceschi House. Can you imagine
That'd be
that?
amazing.
Oh, so good.
It would be so rad.
Your host
And I think
dressed as Mussolini.
no, Florence Maverick, come on. She tries to give you drinks the whole time. I would pay to go on one, and like they could help pay for the restoration. So I'd love to see that happen. Like something
awesome.
like that, I think would be amazing. It would only have to be a couple nights a month, and I think it
small
would bring in.
groups, right?
I think it would bring in a huge amount.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Oh, I wish Santa Barbara was the kind of city that would sponsor.
Do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would have like, and we have these quirky little themey ghost tours.
Right, like different stuff.
Yeah.
That's the thing about Franceschi Park, including the house, that it's just so different and you can't find it anywhere. But no, it's not like
you go places like Salem and they lean into the witch thing. When we were in Texas, there's a little shop around the corner from the Alamo that is just like quirky and sells spooky, creepy things. And then they lead ghost tours out of there. And
I went to St. Augustine, Florida once, and it's like
St.
a very
Augustine is
little,
amazing.
It felt like a little miniature Santa Barbara, but like
Really?
it did to me, just like
cool.
touristy and like the history and like we did a pirate ghost tour.
Yeah, it's like Santa Barbara if they leaned into that kind of stuff because like they have. I stayed in a pirate themed hostel there.
No way.
Yeah, and they do go. It's like one of the most haunted towns in the country.
Amazing.
And yeah, they do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
That's so cool. See, I wish that and I think it could happen. Like Santa Barbara isn't a monolith. There are plenty of people like us here, like just the people who've come out and talked to us since we started this podcast, and they're so into it.
Yeah.
We're not alone.
Everybody loves ghost stories.
We'll make it happen.
I didn't find any specifics on who the ghosts of Montarioso might be,
Okay.
but since Alden didn't die there and Francesco Gimarino died in Libya, I'm guessing like other Franceschi members or staff because, okay, so the Riviera, you know, that like web of roads to get up there.
Yeah.
So imagine it's back in the day before cars. How do your servants get to work?
They climb up those stone stairs.
Yep, that's why they're there. So they're for like poor people to get to work. And that's what's in Lower Franceschi Park is one of those. And they like cross the like, I think old little mini stagecoach roads or whatever of the Riviera. I just thought that was so fascinating when I realized like why they're there. They're not just for like the homeowners today to do their jogging. It's just like, so you didn't have to go pick up your servants and down. So I don't know. Could it have been a servant or two who died of overexertion getting to work up those staircases? Don't know. This brings me to another spirit that, at least for me, has some sort of tragic weight to it. And it's a sad one and a true story and not very distant. It's just a sad death. In 2014, in the Lower Franceschi section of the park, where that stone staircase is, a man's body was found badly decomposed in a tree.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And he'd been there for a long time, months. And that makes me so sad that like
awful.
Your life can end in this just terrible way. I mean, I don't know exactly how, but like he ended up in a tree and badly decomposed, and that's not good. Like,
did I miss this? I don't know.
It was right after I met you.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I told you about it, but
maybe.
I think I remember.
Nobody found him for a long time, and that breaks my heart because of his sad end. And it just feels like maybe he had a hard life, and then we also abandoned his body. You know, like we're not there for him as a society, and I don't know. Then like we're just like, oh well, you know, nobody even knew to look for him.
Wow.
There's a Newshawk article called it. The headline is just badly decomposed body near Santa Barbara Park. And his name is in it. So I'm not going to say it here. And he died less than 10 years ago. And I just don't want to cause anyone who knew him like rebound grief. And we don't know the whole story. So I don't feel able to be sensitive about it. So I'm going to just close this episode now with some teen angst. So if, nay, when you go up to the Riviera for your next or first Franceschi visit, please take a moment to imagine my friend who used to have to spend a lot of time after school in Franceschi Park because her mom was involved in the failed Montarioso fundraising in the 90s for the restoration effort that never happened. And she was miserable at that time in her life in high school, and she hated Santa Barbara. Relatable. So she would sit in that little half moon shaped seat set into the hillside, like a little ways down from Montarioso, and scream, "I hate you!" at the whole city below, because you can see the whole city. And it just seemed so efficient.
It's a captive audience.
Yeah, it was like efficient and funny. Like there's so much about that mental picture that makes me so happy.
Yes.
I'm just like, you're the worst.
Such a youth thing to do.
I love it.
That's one of my very favorite mental pictures in life. So I hope you like it too.
I love it.
And that's it. That's my story. Long as it was.
Ooh, that was awesome. That was a lot I did not know about Franceschi House.
Right. And I am so curious about whether Alden meant to live there at first and then was like, I'm just going to turn it into a weird thing and give it to them or whatever. Or if like he really intended to live in it that way.
Yeah. It's interesting to think like, did he think, oh, I'm going to do this thing with the intention that he was going to stay there for a long time? Or was he like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this house really interesting as a gift.
And then hang it on the city.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're welcome with a flourish of a bow.
Yeah.
And I'm out.
Yeah.
So it's time to ask a question of the Magic 8 Ball. And I don't know. My first thought was like, should we ask the Magic 8 Ball if Franceschi House will be saved? But I don't know if I'm emotionally ready to hear a negative answer, even from the Magic 8 Ball.
What about, are the ghosts in Franceschi House related to Franceschi? Like, is it Franceschi family
like from
spirits?
that time that he was there?
Or is it from later?
Okay, we can't do an or.
I know.
Okay. Are there historical ghosts at Franceschi House?
Are there ghosts?
Well, we
have to
know
be
for
old
sure that there are. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Liz is asking.
It's I feel like this answer comes up frequently. It is decidedly so.
Yes.
Yes.
You heard it here first.
Yep.
No
Franceschi
questions
is
anymore.
haunted.
Get up there,
Yep.
but not after a certain time because the caretaker
And
lives
not
there.
in big groups.
Yeah. little
Closes
groups.
at sunset, right? For half hour.
I think so, yeah.
So once again, please respectfully visit Franceschi House
Yes.
before it is gone completely. We'll meet you there.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Hi, Mom.
Thanks for listening to The Ghoul's Guide to Santa Barbara. Like and subscribe on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Ghoul's Guide to SB.
Our website is ghoulsguidetosb.com. Got a spooky story or know of a haunted or paranormal location in Santa Barbara? Send it to us at ghoulsguidetosb@gmail.com.